Her lipstick was smeared, his tie was off, and the only thing between them was me. I don't remember walking over. I don't remember setting the champagne glass down. What I remember is her laugh, echoing over the rooftop like it belonged to someone else. She was on his lap. Not metaphorically. Literally. Her legs draped across the side like they'd rehearsed this scene a dozen times. One heel dangling from her toe, swaying like a metronome to some twisted rhythm I wasn't invited to hear. And him? Brett. Her boss. His hand rested confidently on the back of her bare shoulder, thumb stroking, like he'd claimed her. Like I wasn't even real. I didn't say a word. Not at first. He saw me before she did. That smug, predictable smirk spread across his face like butter on toast, smooth and slow and condescending. I hate how I remember it that clearly. He didn't flinch, didn't move. She turned her head, and that's when the color drained from her face. That perfect, polished expression cracked for just a second, and I saw something real. Guilt? Panic? No, not enough of either. I think what broke me wasn't that she was caught. It was that she wasn't surprised. Like she knew this moment was coming. Like she'd planned it down to the second. And like she was already rewriting the story in her head where I was the bad guy for not understanding her needs. I should have walked away. Left them both in that rooftop jungle of glass walls and false compliments. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled. Then I leaned in close enough that only he could hear what I said next. And when I was done, he begged. Not because I yelled. Not because I threatened him. But because I came prepared. And I hadn't come alone. Let me take you back 3 weeks to where this all started. Not with a message. Not with a lipstick stain. But with a receipt. One that didn't belong to me. And a dinner for 2. At a hotel we've never stayed in. You still with me? Because this is just the beginning. I found the receipt in the laundry. A receipt that didn't belong to me. It wasn't hidden, but it wasn't meant to be found either. Tucked in the inner pocket of the blazer she'd worn the night she claimed to be too exhausted to drive back from her quarterly retreat. It was creased once, but still crisp. Printed in gold-trimmed font. The Lucian Hotel, private dinner. 2 guests, rooftop service, $248. 60, the date matched. The time was 9:18 p.m. That was the same night I'd made her favorite mushroom risotto from scratch and ate it alone while watching a baking show we were supposed to finish together. I didn't ask her about it. Not then. I placed it in my sock drawer, folded into the pages of an old Stephen King paperback I hadn't touched in years. I wasn't ready to confront anything yet. You don't accuse a hurricane of destruction while it's still circling. You wait. You plan. You let the wind get cocky. And Celeste, she was all charm and calm when she got home that night. She even brought me a souvenir mug that said, "Rise and grind." The irony nearly made me laugh. Over the next 2 weeks, I became something I never thought I'd be: observant. Hyper-aware. Not jealous, not paranoid. Just painfully aware. I noticed how she always tilted her phone away now, even when texting her sister. How she wore perfume to errands. How her wardrobe, once filled with tasteful cardigans and pencil skirts, had slowly transformed into form-fitting reds, plunging backs, designer heels. I pretended not to notice, the way a dying tree pretends it's still blooming in October. But I was rotting from the inside. And then she mentioned the party. A company mixer, she said, without making eye contact. Brett wants everyone to bring their partners. Just casual networking. Not your scene, I'm guessing. I shrugged. I'll come. She blinked. Just once. Really? I nodded. Might be fun. That night she tried to be sweet, in her distant way. She kissed my cheek while texting someone. Said I looked good in gray. But she didn't comment on the new tie I bought just for the occasion. And when we arrived at the rooftop venue, she disappeared into the crowd within 5 minutes. Like she was late to a performance I wasn't invited to see. I knew what I was walking into. I wasn't blind. The whispers, the looks, the fake greetings from her co-workers who barely concealed their surprise when I introduced myself. "Oh, you're Daryl." As if I was a footnote in a story they'd already finished reading. But still, nothing prepared me for that moment. Her, draped across Brett's lap, like something out of a perfume ad. Him, with his expensive smugness, his confidence born of people never telling him no. Her hand on his chest, his fingers tracing the line of her spine. Their world, glassy and golden. And me, a glitch in their perfect view. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't shout. Just stood there long enough for the air to shift. Long enough for the music to feel too loud. Long enough for Brett to glance up and realize this wasn't part of the script. And that's when I spoke. Quietly. Calmly. One sentence. I brought a guest too. He'd like a word with you. Brett furrowed his brow, confused. Celeste finally stood, as if sensing something wrong. Then the guest stepped forward, and the look on Brett's face dropped like a stone in cold water. Because my guest wasn't a friend. He wasn't a cop. He wasn't family. He was Brett's divorced ex-employee. The one Celeste never thought I'd track down. The one who had receipts, screenshots, and one particular recording of a conversation from a month ago when Brett joked about getting promoted horizontally. And now, this man, Julian, was smiling, and Brett was paling. And Celeste? She hadn't even begun to understand what was coming. You want to know what Julian said? You want to know what happened when we played that recording? That's next. Julian's presence hit the room like a silent bomb. Not loud, not chaotic, just final. Like the moment in a courtroom when a surprise witness takes the stand and no one breathes for 10 seconds. He wasn't flashy. His suit didn't sparkle. But he had something far more powerful than style. The truth, and absolutely nothing left to lose. I didn't know Julian well. Only what I'd pieced together from a forgotten name on a LinkedIn post and a few blurred mentions on company newsletters that Celeste had once accidentally printed at home. It took me 2 weeks of digging and one quiet phone call to a receptionist who clearly didn't like Brett. From there, it all unfolded. Julian had worked under Brett for 4 years. Left the company abruptly 6 months ago. No explanation. No farewell post. Just gone. But the real story? The real story was this. Brett had fired Julian after Julian found out he wasn't just dating a coworker. He was rotating through them. One of whom was a recently promoted project manager who'd been coached closely by Brett. Celeste. Brett had made promises. Julian had overheard. And in the world of corporate giants where everyone smiles at the Christmas party, no one talks. But Julian had recorded everything. Not for revenge, just for survival. Until now. He walked up slowly, nodded to me once, then looked Brett in the eye with a calm that was almost unnerving. Nice party, he said. Hope it's not being billed to the expense account like last time. Celeste didn't recognize him at first. That's the thing with people like her. They never remember the ones who used to be useful. But Brett? Brett went pale. Paler than I'd ever seen a man get without passing out. His hand dropped from Celeste's arm, and he stepped back, bumping into a tray of shrimp cocktails with a clatter that drew a few glances. What is this? Celeste asked, looking between us like we were actors in a play she'd forgotten auditioning for. Julian didn't answer her. He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and held it out. You might want to hear this, he said. I'd heard the recording already. In fact, I'd listened to it a dozen times while pacing our guest room at 2 a.m., trying not to throw up. But seeing Celeste hear it for the first time, that was something else. Brett's voice, unmistakably smooth. She's clever. I like clever. Smart enough to make it seem real, dumb enough to think I mean it. Unidentified voice laughing. Brett again. You know what they say, promote the ones you sleep with, demote the ones who stop. Silence. Real, heavy silence. Celeste blinked. Her lip twitched. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The color drained from her face in slow motion. She looked at me like I was supposed to say something. Defend her, maybe. Rescue her from this cliff she'd so willingly climbed. But I didn't. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, letting her drown in the noise of her own ambition. People were starting to notice. The music kept playing, the glasses kept clinking, but nearby guests were pretending not to watch while very much watching. Brent's assistant, the one with the nervous smile and always perfect posture, had vanished. Probably to HR. Or legal. Brett exhaled sharply and took a step forward, toward Julian. That's illegal. You recorded a private. Julian didn't flinch. State law says I only need one-party consent. Guess who that was? Brett looked at me next. Desperation flickered in his eyes for the first time. That smugness, that arrogant gleam, had vanished. Look, man. Daryl, let's just talk this out. You're clearly upset. Don't ruin her career over a misunderstanding. I tilted my head, amused. You think I'm the one ruining it. Celeste finally spoke, her voice shaky. Daryl, please. This isn't what it looks like. I turned slowly to face her. Then explain it. Tell me exactly what part of this. You, on his lap, the recording, the hotel receipt. Tell me what part I'm misunderstanding. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Yeah, that's what I thought. And then I pulled out the envelope. The real surprise. The thing I hadn't even told Julian about. Inside it were 6 pages. Printed. Highlighted. Signed. Because, you see, I'd already filed the papers. Not just for the divorce. For the lawsuit. The envelope in my hand wasn't dramatic. No red wax seal, no ominous black folder. Just a plain manila sleeve, soft from the heat of my palm. But to Celeste, it might as well have been a loaded weapon. I handed it to her slowly, never taking my eyes off Brett, who looked like he was calculating how fast he could vanish from this rooftop and still keep his Rolex. Celeste hesitated for a moment before taking it. Her perfectly manicured fingers trembled as she slid the documents out. I watched her face as she read. First confusion, then denial, then a twitch in the corner of her lip, something between panic and shame. And finally, stillness. That awful, tense stillness that only comes when someone realizes the game is over and the board's been cleared without their permission. She barely whispered, You already filed? Yes, I said plainly. 2 days ago. I just needed confirmation that I wasn't crazy. Thank you both for providing that. There was a pause, not long, but long enough to feel like the earth had stopped rotating. And then Brett took a step forward again, this time toward me. Not aggressive, not smug, just desperate. Daryl, come on, man. We can talk. You don't want to make this messy. It's already messy. I cut in, my voice low. And I'm done cleaning up after both of you. I turned to Julian, gave him the nod we agreed on, and he walked toward the elevator. That was his part done. He'd exposed Brett in the one place that mattered. Publicly, surrounded by staff, clients, and a few silent board members who had started watching from the corner like they were suddenly at the opera. Brett knew what this meant. HR complaints could be buried. Gossip could be silenced. But recordings? Delivered by a credible ex-employee in front of witnesses? That was career-ending. And I hadn't even played my second card yet. Celeste's voice shook. This is going to destroy everything I've worked for. I know, I said. I thought about that for a while. Kept me up some nights, actually, wondering if I could live with being the reason your future imploded. She clutched the documents. And you're okay with that now? I looked her dead in the eye. No, I'm not the reason. You are. You chose all of this. I just finally stopped pretending I deserved it. Brett opened his mouth to speak again, probably to launch some half-cooked legal threat or suggest a non-disclosure deal, but I beat him to it. I wouldn't, I said, because I didn't just file for divorce. I filed a whistleblower report, with evidence. The expense accounts, the internal favoritism, the questionable mentorship retreats. Let's just say, if there are skeletons in your closet, Brett. I hired someone to audit the hinges. And for the first time, Brett genuinely looked afraid. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just backed away like I'd grown taller, more solid than he'd thought. Like he was seeing the real me for the first time. Not the band teacher husband, not the forgettable side character, but the man who'd just stolen his power in front of the entire firm. Celeste didn't speak again. She just stood there, holding the papers, mouth slightly open, eyes fixed on a horizon that had suddenly gone dark. I left without another word. Walked past the waiters, the fake smiles, the marble floors. I took the elevator down alone, my heart pounding, my fingers still tingling with adrenaline. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt free and hollow, like everything that had ever weighed me down had been cut away, but I hadn't yet figured out who I was without the weight. But that night, as I lay in the motel bed just outside the city, I checked my phone. There were already 3 voicemails from Celeste, 2 from blocked numbers, 1 text that simply said, "We need to talk. You don't understand everything." I stared at it for a long time, then opened the folder next to me, the one with copies of emails I hadn't shown yet. Emails from someone I'd never expected, someone closer to me than Brett ever was. And that's when I realized this wasn't just an affair. This was something deeper, more calculated, and someone else was involved. I couldn't sleep that night. Not because of regret, that ship had sailed months ago, but because the emails in that folder wouldn't stop staring at me. I'd found them only days before the party, buried inside a forgotten inbox linked to our shared home office computer. Celeste had logged in months ago while troubleshooting a client portal and never signed out. I wasn't snooping. Not at first. I was printing a receipt for car repairs when I noticed her name in the top right corner, and curiosity, as it always does in these stories, became the match that burned everything down. There were 5 emails, all from a name I recognized instantly, but never thought twice about. Addison, Kramer at Midwest Foundation. Org. Addison, my cousin, my blood, my oldest friend. The same Addison who sat next to Celeste at our wedding, who gave a shaky, slightly tipsy toast about how I finally found someone out of my league. He was family. He'd been like a brother since we were kids, camping trips, high school band, Thanksgiving poker nights. And now he was sending midnight emails to my wife with subject lines like, "You're not crazy, and he doesn't get you." I stared at the screen that night in the motel, my hands trembling harder than they had at the rooftop. I clicked on the oldest one first, dated 8 weeks ago, just days before Celeste started coming home late. Hey, I'm not saying this to stir anything up, but the way he talks about your job, it's clear he resents your ambition. You deserve better than being made to feel small. The next one was worse. If it were me, I'd never make you split yourself in half just to be palatable. You're brilliant. You've always been more than someone's wife. And then the third. I keep replaying that night in St. Louis. I know we said we wouldn't, but I can't help it. You felt real. I felt real. Tell me I wasn't imagining it. I dropped the mouse. I didn't even need to read the last 2. I did, of course, like pulling out the knife just to confirm how deep it had gone in. But I already knew. This wasn't just Brett. That smug, self-important executive was the distraction. The flare in the sky. The real damage had already been done by someone I never suspected. Someone who knew me. Someone who knew exactly where the cracks were. Addison. Suddenly, everything began to make horrifying sense. The comments he made at the family barbecue about how city women are wired different. The way Celeste laughed a little too hard at his jokes during Christmas. How, last month, when I mentioned she was distant, he said, "Maybe she's just bored. Man, you've been in teacher mode too long." I remember brushing it off. I even defended her. Now I just felt sick. The text from Celeste, "You don't understand everything," was sitting on my screen like a dare. And maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't understand. Maybe there was still more rot hiding under the floorboards. But one thing was now undeniably, sickeningly clear. She hadn't just betrayed our marriage. She'd chosen someone who knew me better than anyone else. And they'd both tried to make me feel like I was losing her because I was too small for her world. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a plan. I didn't respond to her text. Not yet. Instead, I made a call. One I never imagined I'd make. To my uncle, Addison's father. The conversation was short, quiet, explosive in its own way. And when it ended, I had an address. Not Addison's office. Not his apartment. The place where it all began. A weekend cabin 2 hours north of Springfield. The one my family had used for generations. The one I'd once painted with Addison after our grandfather died. The one that now, apparently, had become a hidden sanctuary for whatever they were. I packed my bag and left the motel just before sunrise. And as I drove toward that cabin, a single thought looped in my mind like a broken record. How far does betrayal go when it starts with blood? You want answers? The drive to the cabin was quiet, but my mind wasn't. Every cracked mile of asphalt, every mile marker passed under gray Missouri skies, seemed to pull a different version of me apart. Part of me was rehearsing what I'd say if Addison was there. If he opened the door with that same sheepish, half-apologetic smirk he always used when he broke something he couldn't afford to fix. Another part of me imagined him not being there, and that almost felt worse. Because if he wasn't, it meant they'd moved on to somewhere I hadn't even imagined yet, some deeper layer of deception I hadn't uncovered. It was still early morning when I arrived. Fog hung low along the tree line, and the gravel popped under my tires like distant bones cracking. The cabin sat just where I remembered it, quiet, modest, and cursed now by memory. My grandfather had built it with his own hands, and every time I visited as a boy, it felt like walking into a storybook. Now it felt like a grave. The first sign something was wrong came as soon as I stepped out of the car, the smell of fresh coffee. There was no one in sight, no movement behind the windows, but the scent drifted through the cold air like a mocking invitation. I walked up the porch, slowly. The wood groaned like it recognized my weight, like it had missed me and was ashamed of what it was now holding. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. The door was unlocked. Inside, Everything was disturbingly neat. 2 mugs sat on the small dining table, one half empty, one still steaming. A knit throw blanket folded over the arm of the old leather sofa. Candles. A bottle of red wine, uncorked. And next to it, a book, spine cracked, pages dog-eared, that I'd loaned Addison myself 3 years ago. A book he'd once said wasn't his thing. That stung in a way I can't even explain. I moved carefully, scanning every corner, half expecting Celeste to step out of the hallway, startled, robe wrapped around her, as if this was all just a misunderstanding. But the house was empty. Or so I thought. When I opened the bedroom door, I found something I didn't expect. Photos. Laid out on the bed like someone had been sorting through them in a hurry. Dozens of them. Most were printed from phones, selfies, dinners, blurred hotel lobbies. Even one taken from the front seat of my car, with Addison smirking in the passenger seat and Celeste looking back in the mirror behind him. But the worst photo, the one that sucked the air straight out of my lungs, was of my classroom. Taken from outside, through the glass. I was inside, standing at the whiteboard, smiling, teaching, completely unaware. I staggered back, nausea crawling up my throat. This wasn't just about cheating. This wasn't emotional weakness. This wasn't 2 people caught in a moment. This was studied, watched, recorded, planned. And just when I thought I couldn't fall any deeper into the pit they'd dug beneath my life, I saw the envelope. My name written on the front in Celeste's handwriting, sitting on the nightstand beside the bed like a landmine. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single letter. 1 page. No apology. No emotion. Just cold logic. She wrote that she never meant for it to go this far. That Addison understood her in a way I never could. That the affair had started as an accident, but had evolved into something strategic. Her word, strategic. She said she'd been approached months ago about an opportunity to join a new startup in Chicago. A well-funded real estate tech firm. Brett had offered to recommend her. Addison, she wrote, had been helping her position the narrative. They weren't just lovers. They were partners. And I was the loose end. That's why they started gaslighting me. The lateness. The "you're too insecure" lines. The whole "you're just jealous" performance. They were softening the ground, making it easier to paint me as unstable, so when they left, they'd already looked like the good guys. Only I didn't play my role the way they expected, and now their plan was unraveling. I stood there for a long time, letting that letter burn through my fingers like acid. Then I snapped a photo of it, folded it back up, and placed it where I'd found it. I didn't take anything. I didn't leave a note. I didn't break anything, though God knows I wanted to. Instead, I walked out, calm, focused, and strangely energized, because now I knew everything. And I still had cards they hadn't seen yet. They wanted strategy. They were about to learn what real revenge looks like when it's served with discipline. Revenge, it turns out, doesn't begin with a grand gesture. It doesn't require rage or public spectacle. It starts in the quiet, in the stillness after the storm, when you know the worst of the pain has already passed and what's left is calculation. I didn't drive home from the cabin immediately. I stopped at a diner an hour out, somewhere I used to eat with Addison after fishing trips. I ordered black coffee and eggs and didn't touch either. Instead, I pulled out my notebook, the same one Celeste bought me last Christmas when I said I wanted to journal more. The irony made me smile. I started writing, not thoughts, not emotions. A plan. Step 1 was information. And thanks to Celeste's arrogance and Addison's overconfidence, I already had plenty. I had email timestamps. I had photo evidence. I had her handwritten confession. I had Julian's recording. I had hotel receipts and bank transactions. I even had a screen recording of the web browser from our home computer showing Addison's flights lined up with the dates of her company retreats. It was airtight. Step 2 was containment. I went dark. No texts. No calls. I blocked Celeste, Addison, even my aunt, who, God bless her, texted me. Whatever's going on, don't do anything crazy. Crazy would have been staying married to a woman who plotted my erasure with a man who used to steal fries off my plate and call me brother. I wasn't crazy. I was done playing polite. Step 3 was execution, and no, not the illegal kind. The social kind. The kind you can't undo with PR, therapy, or late-night apologies. First, I sent a copy of the letter Celeste left in the cabin, along with photos of the romantic emails and photos of my classroom being surveilled, to Brett's company's legal department. No threats. No accusations. Just a note that said, "As a concerned spouse and whistleblower, I thought this might be of interest given your upcoming board review." I also CC'd a few anonymous HR tip lines and a journalist friend of Julian's who owed him a favor. That part wasn't about Celeste. It was about ensuring Brett's ship sank first. He thought I was just a hurt husband. He didn't realize I'd already removed his power piece from the board. Then came Celeste. She didn't reach out again, not directly. But I noticed a Venmo request for $3,700 appear from her account the next morning labeled half mortgage. Cute. As if we were roommates splitting rent, not ex-partners wrapped in deceit. I denied it. Then I filed a motion to freeze our joint assets pending litigation. My lawyer, a no-nonsense divorce specialist I hired the moment I left the rooftop party, filed a temporary injunction on our shared business account too, the one she used to fund her professional wardrobe. Then came Addison. This part was personal. I mailed him something. Not a letter. Not evidence. Just one thing. A photo of me and him at the cabin, age 13, holding fishing rods and grinning at the camera. On the back, I wrote, "You had all of me, and still needed what was mine." That was it. No threats. No drama. Just a reminder that he hadn't just destroyed a marriage. He'd desecrated a history. And as all of this unfolded, the HR calls, the frozen accounts, the rumors, I went silent. No social media. No reaction. Just silence. Because silence, I learned, is loud when guilt fills the room. It's louder than screaming. Louder than tears. And it forced Celeste and Addison to unravel without me lifting another finger. By the end of that week, Celeste had been placed on leave pending investigation. Brett had resigned, though he called it a strategic exit. Addison, he moved out of his condo and went quiet online, probably waiting for the smoke to clear, not realizing the fire was just getting started. But the biggest blow was still coming. And it wasn't from me. It came from someone I hadn't spoken to in months. Someone who, until now, I didn't know had been watching the whole thing unfold from the shadows. My father. You see, he doesn't talk much. Vietnam vet, owns a farm, doesn't care for drama. But when I visited him that weekend to return some tools, he poured us 2 bourbons, looked me in the eye and said, "Son, I know what they did. And I think it's time your mother saw the truth about her golden nephew." That's when I knew. This war wasn't mine alone anymore. You want to see how it ends? My father didn't raise his voice when he offered to help. He never had to. When a man like him says he's going to take care of something, you believe him. And he did. Within 3 days, the family knew. My mom, my uncle, my cousins. The story spread not through gossip, but through quiet, cold truth. Addison didn't try to deny it. Not this time. The evidence had done its job, and so had my silence. Celeste's world, built so carefully on charm and control, began to buckle in slow, steady collapse. The firm removed her from client work indefinitely. Her startup contact in Chicago, the one she was so strategically aligning with, pulled back the offer once whispers of unethical conduct began to surface. And Brett, he was last seen updating his LinkedIn profile from executive leader to open to opportunities. I smiled when I saw it. But the best part? I didn't have to destroy them. They did it all on their own. Once the truth was no longer mine to hold, once I handed it over to people who actually mattered to them, their masks fell off like cheap paint in the rain. And while they scrambled to salvage whatever pieces were left, I was already moving forward. I sold the house. I didn't want a single tile that had been touched by their lies. I bought a small place 2 towns over, nothing fancy, but mine. Quiet. Peaceful. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. The walls are filled now, with messy, chaotic, beautiful things I don't have to explain to anyone. I teach my students with more patience than I thought I had left in me. I take long walks without checking my phone. And for the first time in years, I sleep. No anxiety waiting in the dark. No wondering what time she'll get home. No second-guessing myself into silence. Just sleep. Deep and dreamless. And I wake up knowing that the worst has passed. That I didn't just survive, I outgrew them. Celeste sent one last email. 2 weeks after everything fell apart. It wasn't long. I never expected you to become this version of yourself. You're stronger than I gave you credit for. Maybe you always were. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I didn't respond. What was left to say? Some people think closure is a conversation. I've learned it's not. Closure is the moment you stop needing answers from the people who broke you. It's when peace stops asking permission. Addison moved out of state, I heard. Someone said Colorado. Doesn't matter. He's not family anymore. Not to me. But I wish him the best. I really do. Not out of kindness, but because I'm finally free enough to not care. And me? I'm still here. Still soft. Still the guy who tears up at Pixar movies and waves at strangers. But now I know, being soft doesn't make you weak. Being quiet doesn't mean you're invisible. And sometimes, the best revenge is becoming so whole that the people who tried to shatter you can't even recognize what's left. So if you're reading this, and you've been made to feel small, just know, the people who try to bury you never expect you to come back holding the shovel. Thank you for listening. This was my story. And now, it's just a chapter. Not the end. Daryl,